Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're here today to give you some information from some medical experts in Haywood County about the COVID-19 crisis that we've got. As y'all probably are aware, I had Commissioner Hayes put on Facebook a request for questions with regards to things that people want to know. And I felt like it was important that we bring somebody that really knows to this. And I'd like you to introduce you to Robert Calorie with Faith Family Medical Clinic here in Brownsville, Tennessee on East Main Street. And if you want to, we'll just start right away with questions, unless Robert wants to address you first.
I think this is a serious issue. I appreciate you guys watching this. Of course, we want to make sure that y'all understand the importance and, of course, the facts that you guys want to know. So we will we'll do the best we can to answer them. Of course, some of the guidelines have changed from time to time, but I do think that we have a great grasp on how we can move forward with doing this in a safe manner for the community.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've known Robert all his life, but I will tell you, he's one of the smartest people I know. And I can't think of anybody better to answer your questions than Mr. Calorie. We'll start right away with the first question. Robert, what are the symptoms of this particular illness?
The general symptoms you're going to have, about 70 to 80% of all cases, have a fever, they have a dry cough, and generally you're going to have fatigue. Some cases have also had some nausea and diarrhea and other GI symptoms associated with it, and a mild headache. But for general purposes, it's generally comprised of a fever, a dry cough, and it can progress rather rapidly.
There's been some talk about pink eye. Is pink eye also one of the symptoms?
There's been numerous things that have come out in regard to not only pink eye, but loss of smell, loss of taste. Those haven't truly been statistically evident that I've seen in studies, but they're coming out with new research hourly, so that could be one in the future, but right now that's not one that we're looking for right off the bat for testing purposes.
When should I decide to go get a test?
Well, the number one thing I recommend anyone do, regardless of who your healthcare provider is, discuss this with them. This would be the priority with all the community members. If you're concerned and you think that you may have shortness of breath or you have any symptom that's not typical for you and something feels different, if you start developing a fever, you have any type of respiratory issues, of course we need you to come on in or call at least prior to, because we're not having a lot of people come into the clinic at this point. We're trying to keep it for more acute visits, and being able to be tested is something that you will have to really discuss with your healthcare provider to get further guidance in that area.
Why should I test?
The goal of testing is not only to know the numbers and to know facts, those are great, but it's how we deal with the facts. It's what we do with them and how we stop the spread going from person to person. Because if we at least know that someone like Mayor Livingston or myself had COVID-19, well, of course, we would want to quarantine ourselves and we would want to stay away from others to stop the spread. And that's generally the motive that we've been using, and you've heard lots of things called mitigation factors, which that's a big fancy word for steps that we're taking to stop the spread. So a lot of people see mitigation, they hear mitigation all the time, but don't truly know what it means. And basically that is a step that's intervening between what would normally happen and what we're doing now to stop the spread of the virus to keep our community healthier.
How does the test work?
In a general sense, most people have probably had a test that's very similar. If you've had a regular rapid screen flu test, the flu test is a swab of your nose. Some request one side, some request both, and some also do in the back of the throat. But most commonly, it's very similar to a flu swab, where they put a nasal swab up each nostril and get a sample, and then it goes in a tube to which we send to a lab and they evaluate it further.
Where do I go to get a test?
Well, most of the time you can contact not only your healthcare provider, but you can also call the health department wherever you live. In Haywood County, they do testing, but they also screen you. So I do recommend, from my understanding, calling prior to coming to at least get the pre-screening questions out of the way. But you can normally go to your local healthcare provider, and they can at least guide you in the right area. I know for myself personally, we're testing, but we're only testing select numbers because we only have a certain amount of tests. But I will say, normally your healthcare provider, wherever they may be, can provide you with those resources.
If you would, tell me, how long does it take to get this test back?
Generally, the test comes back in about 3 to 5 days. It has been variable depending on not only the lab company, but the testing sites are simply overwhelmed. The entire system's overwhelmed right now. But I would say if you've been tested, you need to at least self-isolate until your test comes back negative or positive, number one. But there are specific guidelines that are out there now where if you think that you may have these symptoms, of course, please stay in and please don't go to Walmart or go out shopping simply because you don't feel quite as good, but don't use that as an excuse to not stay in and self-isolate.
So basically, after test results are done, I'm supposed to go home and stay at my house.
Yes.
And with my family, and stay away from them as much as possible, as if I possibly had an illness. Is that right?
That's what the recommendations are now, from my understanding. I definitely recommend that as far as you being inside your home. Of course, you're going to have contact with other individuals, but I do highly encourage you to, if you have a separate bedroom, sleep in that bedroom. If you share common areas, please make sure that you're cleaning those areas, the doorknobs, the door handles, or any of those things. But keeping away from small children especially is probably a primary goal, due to it being very vulnerable kids, and there's not as many medications that can be used to treat symptoms in a kid versus an adult.
What do I do if I have a negative test?
Well, if you have a negative test, that's great. We want to look on the bright side. On the other side of it, there can be other issues that can present themselves like a COVID-19 case. You can have allergies, you can have respiratory issues, especially people with breathing issues, COPDs, your smokers, your asthmatics. A lot can test negative, but still have something going on. So I do encourage people, yes, the test is important, but we need to make sure that other things aren't going on as well that could also be infectious. So we may very well test you for the flu, which has seemed to be lowering in numbers, but we also don't want to forget that it may be a simple illness that could be causing the issue as well. So you may have multiple tests run, and you could have further evaluation needed after we get a negative test.
What do I do if I have a positive test?
If you have a positive test, number one thing, self-isolate. There are some great resources out there. The biggest thing is you have to be isolated for a minimum of 7 days. But there is a 72-hour window of feeling well and fever-free without medications, as far as febrile medications go, that you need to be inside. Those guidelines will be posted online as well. We'll have those resources available to you. But at least 7 days is the absolute minimum, plus a 72-hour, which is 3 days of fever-free and feeling well.
Do I need to use different restrooms and different bathrooms from my family?
If that's feasible, that would be a great option. I don't want to be a home wrecker, but on the other hand, I do think it would be very advisable to definitely isolate yourself within your home. And if you have another restroom that's available, that would be ideal.
What do I do for food while I'm self-isolating?
One of the biggest things with food, please don't go anywhere to get food. Please, even if it's drive-through, please allow others to bring food into the home, especially your close contacts that are already exposed to you. So keep that in mind, that they could also bring you food if you need anything, and also prepare food for you.
Why should I self-isolate?
Number one thing is to protect others. You're most likely going to have mild symptoms. About 80% of all COVID-19 cases have mild symptoms, which is simply the cough, the fever, that are normally maintained at home. If you have other underlying health conditions that are immunocompromised, or you have breathing difficulties, you need to possibly take more precautions as far as self-isolating. But I would say that the number one thing you can do is protect others.
Are you trying to protect yourself, your family, and your friends and your loved ones? Is that what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. You got to consider not only yourself, but you got to consider your fellow man in the community. That's one of the utmost important, to stop the spread so that normal life can resume as soon as possible.
Let's talk a little bit about social distancing. We're hearing a lot about social distancing. Why should I socially distance myself from my family and my friends?
The biggest thing with social distancing is the spread of COVID-19 is via droplet. So it has to be suspended in the air, and a droplet cannot normally propel itself greater than 6 feet. So if you were to cough, you were to sneeze, droplets or any kind of particles should not be able to go past 6 feet from a scientific standpoint. And that's the main importance of social distancing, to help those mitigation factors that we discussed earlier.
You know, I've seen recently they're talking about coughing, and they're telling you to cough into your sleeve or sneeze into your sleeve. Why is that?
Well, number one, your hands touch your face all the time. So not only should we be hand washing all the time now, using hand sanitizer and everything, but keeping your sneeze into your elbow, into your sleeve, it not only contains it more because there's fabric there, but there's also a larger surface area and also an area that you're not going to be touching your face with, is primarily.
Do you spread the virus if you cough in your hands and then touch a hard surface?
Absolutely. It can live on the hard surface. There have been varied studies regarding that, but supposedly if you do cough in your hand, you can transmit the virus onto another surface that's even not a hard surface.
You know, we in the South hug and we shake hands. Okay, would you comment about that, please?
That's been a difficult thing for everyone, myself included. I would say not shaking hands, not hugging. We're good old Southern boys that want a handshake and a hug from mom and those kind of things. But for right now, it is great to have those social distancing, those non-contact visits. Even if you go visit with someone, try to not contact them with a handshake or a hug if you can refrain, which I think at this time it would be advisable to do.
I'm going to go over a few things and see if you think this is a good thing. Is it a good thing that we try to avoid large crowds?
Absolutely. Any type of large crowd is basically brewing a problem. It's going to just make the problem worse than it is. And I highly, highly encourage people, especially when they're going to a store, if you could send one family member instead of the whole family, that would be very advantageous for not only the stores, but it also stopping the spread with the large environments as well as funerals and other things that are taking place right now.
You know, you've heard the socially distancing 6 feet, and the CDC just came out that recommending a larger distance than 6 feet. Can you tell me, is it preferable to a larger distance versus shorter distance?
Of course, the best distance you can get is what we go for, but there are certain scenarios in which you can't be 12 feet from someone. But if you have ample space, I definitely think having the most space available would be ideal, but all these situations currently aren't ideal.
You've also heard things about washing your hands. Why should we wash our hands?
There is a very, very long-standing issue that people think hand sanitizer is good 100% of the time. It is in a way. It's a great avenue to use in between hand washing, but hand washing for at least 20 seconds. I tell people happy birthday twice. If you sing happy birthday twice, that generally comes out to be about 20 seconds in which you can wash your hands, and you can stand there at the sink and make sure you're getting adequate hand washing.
They've also been talking about keeping your hands away from your face, your eyes, and your nose. Why is that important?
That's the most common modes of transmission. So if you were to have the virus on your hands and it goes directly to your face, that's where you most likely will get the virus into your actual nasal cavity, your oral cavity, or your mucous membranes of your eyes.
I've also heard something about cooking food and cooking food well. Why is that important?
The spread of this was originally started with meat in China from Wuhan, so they're now recommending making sure that you have your meat cooked completely, even though that's a hard thing to go by if you're used to eating rare steaks. But I will say they recommend that to kill all bacteria that could be possibly living on the surface of the food.
You know, some people have the habit of drinking pop or drinking in a glass that somebody else has used before it's washed. Is that a bad idea?
Absolutely. If you can, I'm not a huge endorser of plastic, but disposable cups at this time are very, very good because you can use them, you can throw them away, there's no lingering germs on the surface. So I definitely recommend doing those type of things to help not only yourself, but help your community in stopping the spread of the COVID-19.
Is it a good idea to stay away from other people when you're sick?
Absolutely, because even if you have a negative test, you can still be spreading things, and you don't know what other people's health problems are, and some people may not have a great immune system, some people may be pregnant and you may not know it. There's different scenarios where, of course, if you're sick, stopping that contact with those individuals, or truly as many people as you can, is priority.
Is it a good idea that we stay away from other people that are sick?
Sure. There again, your contact is back and forth. It goes both ways. And when you can potentially contract a virus or you can share the virus, those two things we really need to stop and slow. But that is a difficult thing. But keep in mind, this will pass. When it passes is to be determined, but stopping the transmission of this virus is what's going to be most crucial to especially rural counties and some of your high populated metropolitan areas.
I know we started talking before this, we taped this, and we talked about sanitizing. Why is that important?
Sanitizing is your way to stop your transmission. If you have anything on a door handle, something you touch commonly, if you go throughout the day and you think of how many times you pick up a cell phone, you pick up just a telephone, you pick up anything at your house, you pull the doorknob, it will possibly live on that surface for 2 to 3 days. That's still out there for debate, but I will say that is where your transmission is going to come, and sanitizing your everyday use items is definitely a priority at this time.
Robert, in concluding this, can you tell me, when are we going to get back to normal?
Well, I recently have heard a lot of people with the extension, and everybody thinks it's just going to last until May 1st. There's going to be a gradual progression of how we're able to open up the private sector as well as the public environments that we're in. I think it will be rather delayed, but it depends on the area. I think every area is going to have a different opening plan. But I will say normal is going to be far away for right now. But I will say it will be much better if we can do these things that we've discussed to get the spread down, to stop the numbers from climbing, to reduce our death rates, to also get the testing that we need done completed, to know who truly has it, which will help us stop the spread.
You hear several times people talk about the peak. What is the peak?
The peak is when we get to the max number of cases and we have what we call a plateau where it evens off. So we're ramping up at this point, and the peak is still, they're saying, potentially a week to a week and a half off. But that changes day to day based off projections. And the peak is when the maximum number of people that we think in this area have it. But that will also be prolonged if we do not do these mitigation factors, trying to social distance and self-isolate if you think you're sick, if you have any of those things. We will get the peak to be much lower.
After we get to the peak, is the coast clear? Can we go back to do what we want to do?
Absolutely not. If we let our guard down, irregardless of what plays out, we're going to be back at square one if we let our guard down. And I think some of the things that we've really implemented very strongly during this period will carry on for quite a while. Not that we're not going to be able to socialize and have normal lives, but I do think some of the mitigation factors that they have out there will become a normalcy until there's a vaccine or something better approved to treat it.
We're starting to see people in Haywood County wear masks. Why is that important?
The masks from the CDC recommendations are not only to protect yourself from droplets coming in, but it's also to keep droplets from going out of your mask. And they originally said no mask, but we also prefer that if you can get a fabric mask so that the healthcare workers can access the medical grade masks. But if you have any mask at your disposal, please use it if you're out in a public area. It's not required to drive in your car, but I will say if you get out and you're interacting with others, please be mindful that a mask is recommended at this point. Occasionally
we're seeing people with gloves. Can you tell me why that's important or whether that is a good idea?
I definitely will not shoot down the idea of gloves, but I will caution people about gloves because they go in a store, they pick up items, they wipe their face, then they get in their car and they put it on the steering wheel. So always remove your gloves after you're out of the environment. But I definitely think if you have access to gloves, yes, use them. Use them when you go in. And also keep in mind, once you have it on your glove is now contaminated just as much as your hand. So please don't take gloves as a 100% success rate at stopping the spread to your face. You have to keep the glove off of your face, keep it off of your steering wheel and some of those surfaces so that it doesn't survive.
You've heard several people talk about that if someone is positive, that they come in and try to find out who they've been around and who they've talked to,
sure,
who they've spent time to, and they're referring to it as tracing.
Yes.
Why is that important?
Contact tracing will basically create a backwards flow of who you've been in contact, who you've talked to, and who would be potentially infected. And that will give not only the state, but other healthcare providers, other avenues to go down to have that contact tracing to access those individuals for potential testing and infection. So contact tracing is going to be becoming more prevalent. They're seeing the benefits of it not only in Europe and China, so they're starting to implement those here in the U.S. as well as the state of Tennessee.
Robert, in summary, is there anything you'd like to tell the people out there?
Number one, be careful. Consider others. Please use the basic tools that we've given you, such as hand washing, social distancing, using a mask where applicable, but please take this as serious as you can. Please know that life will get back to normal, and please contact your healthcare provider with any questions or concerns that you may have in regards to your health.
Thank you, Robert.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have appreciated Mr. Calorie in the questions and answers that he's given today. He's given some really good information with regards to the substance. As it was announced on Brownsville Radio today, I have asked the governor to give me authority to put some restrictions on some of the businesses. As y'all all are aware, we have had some circumstances that are pretty egregious, and y'all have expressed y'all's fears at times and y'all's disgust at times. Well, these things, it's hard as an American to adjust our lifestyle from what it has been. So consequently, that's one of the freedoms of America, but at the same time, in times of crisis, we've got to adjust our conduct and the way we do business. I've asked several of the businesses to employ several circumstances that need to provide for the safety of Haywood Countyans. One thing I would ask, and I've asked all of y'all, leave your children at home. No one needs to be taking their kids to any of the stores with regards to it and subjecting themselves to the possibility of getting these illnesses. And you certainly don't need to be subjecting the child. Leave your aunt, your uncle, all the other people there. Let it be one adult that goes into the store, and you're not there to socialize, you're there to buy things. In other words, get to the store as quickly as possible, do the business that you're there for, but at the same time, as Robert said, it's no reason to be frightful, but it's cautious is the right word, and socially responsible. Be considerate of your fellow neighbor. Be considerate that you yourself may be transmitting a disease to someone else. Though you personally didn't get sick, they may get very sick. Not only very sick, it may kill them. So under the circumstances, be conscious of your actions. Number two, as you were aware, the governor came in today and said, we're not going to have school for the remaining portion of the year. When I say the remaining portion of this fiscal calendar year. Yes, I do believe school will go back in the fall, but at the same time, it will be some adjustments. The governor has said in his speech to all of the county mayors today that we will be rolling out changes and we will be lifting some restrictions in approximately 2 weeks. Now, those will be slow. It's not going to be business as usual, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be with adjustments, It's going to be with adjustments and still with restrictions. So please pay attention. It's important for your family, my family, and everyone. I would like to ask for your prayers, and I pray for you as well. It's one of these situations that we're in this together, and we'll all get out of this together. Thank you.